Stray is a game unlike many others I've seen. It kind of came out of nowhere last year when it was announced, and from the premise, it looked like a gimmick. It had one simple gimmick, which was you play as a cat, you do cat things, and that was the whole game. That was the surface level. It was going to be a cool, almost tech demo. And then it came out this year in the third quarter, obviously, so we've already had some great games. We've had Elden Ring, we've had the new LEGO Star Wars game, but this game seriously knocked it out of the park. From a completely new studio that has never released anything before, here's my complete review of what I think is a masterpiece that doesn't need anything else to it. It has the perfect story. Everything about it is so well made, so crafted perfectly, that I think it could be one of the best games of the year. So, starting off, Stray is, on the surface level, a game where you play as a cat in a dystopian future where humans are just gone and the robot denizens that they lived with have taken over. But once you get into the game, you're greeted with really fucking awesome environments. You start off in this area called the Outside of the Wall, which is a massive, overtaken expanse, but also urban. So you've got these giant concrete walls either side of you, and this, almost industrial kind of feeling, but it's been overtaken by nature, so there is greenery everywhere. You've got trees in random places. And you go through here with your little cat family, and you play as a ginger cat, which I'm going to refer to in this review as just the Stray. The introduction is a nicely little packaged walkthrough of how to play the game, the different little gimmicks such as scratching trees, drinking water, interacting with other cats, meowing, all of that stuff that you want to do in a cat game. And you've got about a 10-minute introduction which nicely shows off the mechanics of the game, the beauty of the game, how much they've managed to do, how nice the art style is, because it doesn't have that ultra-realistic feeling. It has its own artsy twist on it which looks amazing. And I think in all, the game, this first intro is enough to pull anyone in, and it's not that long. This tiny first section I would say is maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And it works really well to draw someone into the game because it's cute, it's impressive, and it's ominous. So it ends off with a heart-wrenching thing of your cat falling off of a pipe and clambering to save itself before falling about 30 feet, with your cat family looking at you, meowing, doing absolutely fucking nothing to help you. Which, I mean, they probably couldn't have done anything, but still, it would have been nice for some help. And then you wake up, you're in this dark, dank, dingy place that's obviously at the bottom of this hole. None of your cat friends around you, and your leg is injured, and you're limping. You have a little sequence where you're limping along, and then you pass out for, I'm assuming, a few days, and you wake up, and you start traversing through a place called the Dead City. And immediately you start to notice that the technology around here is guiding you. Neon signs are making you go in certain places or directing you places, and you'll also notice these tiny little pink blobs are scattering around everywhere, not attacking you but not coming near you, and you have a fun little platforming essence to show off the main part of the game. So this is kind of what the environments look like from now on. You have a nice mix of the really dark underground dingy looking thing, but they mix it in with loads of neon light and like a cyberpunk feel that doesn't feel out of place because it just mixes so well, because a lot of the signs are broken and only a few of them are lit up, which lead you to certain elements in the game. You go about doing some cat things, some traversals, scratching at rugs, drinking water once again, using buckets to zipline places. And you kind of just keep going around doing these little puzzles, figuring out the main mechanics of the game, knocking paint cans into glass roofs, and then you come to a section of the game where you find a robot on the floor, and he's clinging on to life. Obviously, in cat fashion, you walk up to him, you tap him on the head, and he dies, because cats are absolute chads and they don't give a shit. And you kind of get a weird aura from this robot in the middle of nowhere, with complete desertion around it, just rubbish bags and the odd neon sign. With barely any power, you tap him on the head and he dies. The only other thing you've seen in this place are those purple pink things that are like little blobs with an eye. And you start to realize something is weird, because there's nothing here. Most of the signs aren't working apart from the ones that are guiding you. There's just rubbish everywhere, there's no other robots. You then head into a different room and you find a staircase, and then you find hundreds of the little pink blobs staring you down. And obviously primal instinct takes over and your cat fucking runs for it. And after this nice harmonic and scenic intro that leads into a slightly more dark and a slightly more interesting twist, you're thrust into this adrenaline-inducing chase scene through this awesome cyberpunk city with all these lights and then these big fucking pink blobs throwing themselves at you. And obviously, because it's a cat game, you don't want to see the cat get hurt, so it hurts way more when the cat does get attacked. You do this chase scene, it's only about 1.5 minutes long, which is kind of a testament to the whole game. They don't overstay their welcome with anything. There's no parts of the game that are too long or too tedious, because everything is shortened to the perfect amount of time. And it makes for a good game, because you can tell that these developers just wanted to make a good game. They're not out here to make the highest grossing game ever. They're not out here for live service and 1 million DLCs. They want to make one single experience. And so yeah, it's a little chase scene. You end up in a room afterwards with a bunch of TV screens that are now pointing you in another direction. So you've got over you figured out what the pink blobs are. Now to the second part of the puzzle is, what are these TV screens? What's the technology leading you to? So you follow the TVs more, you have another near-death experience with a plank, which scares the shit out of you, or it scared me the first time. And you keep travelling through this cyberpunk city, eventually reaching an area called the Flat. Now, the Flat is the first kind of interactive area where it's not just platforming. You go up to this big computer screen and it has some writing on it that just basically says help. And because you're a cat, you don't know literate English, so you kind of just walk up to the keyboard, you run around on it, and then you press enter, and you just speak gibberish. And this guy basically tells us that he is looking for a body. He directs us into the other room. You walk in, you do some puzzles to get this guy a little robot body, and we are introduced to B12. This is the secondary character for the entire campaign. He is the translator, which makes the cat understand everything. He gives you a cute little suit that the cat hates at first because it's clothing, and it's a cat. They hate clothing. And he basically is just like he's your heads-up display, I guess. He translates everything, he picks up items, and then eventually he is put into the story as we're trying to discover his past, because he has lost all of his memories, and the only thing he can remember is that he was helping a scientist. So we start to figure out his core gameplay mechanics, such as finding keys, opening doors, and we start to traverse even further into the Dark City, or the Dead City, and eventually you come to a corridor and you see another one of these robot things, but this time it's alive, and it kind of stands in the hallway and it looks at you, and it then slams on an alarm, which goes mental, and you go up to him and he locks himself away. You then continue to head through this like suburban area, seeing more and more of these robots running into their homes away from you, until you reach the sort of plaza area where you see some more robots in a little cluster, and 3 of them or 4 of them go into this garage, and one big one with like a kimono on closes the garage door. He has like a big like bow staff, and he starts speaking to you and he asks you, what are you? And you learn the name of the game's main antagonists, which are the Zurks. Those are the little pink blobs that were basically chasing you before, and that is why they caused the lockdown, because they thought the cat was a Zerk. But when they find out they're not, we show them a little postcard that we have that the robot had of the outside, because he figured out that the robot figured out that the cat is wanting to go back to its family, so he is trying to figure out how to get to the outside, because that was the scientist's whole mission, was to find the outside. You speak to this little robot guy, and he basically just tells you everything. And we have a whole section. This is where the first section of the game opens up. You have this awesome, expansive, cyberpunk-esque like suburb. I guess it's more of a city, but it's a very enclosed city. There is neon signs everywhere. There's rubbish everywhere, but there's also a small sense of community where there's little bundles of robots, and they've all got like jackets on, and they all have personalities, and when you can speak to all of them, and they all feel different. It's very easy to make a game like this and have all of the NPCs feel like the same entity that you're speaking to in different clothes. But all these robots feel different, they have different things to say, they have different experiences, they'll have... there's a few vendor NPCs, so in the first area you have a little music guy who you can find sheet music and bring it back to him, and he'll play it for you, and you can sleep next to him while he plays it. There's a merchant guy who's quite useful for the story, because you need him to find some stuff for you. You need to find some stuff for him and then buy other things off of him. And then there's a granny who basically knits you stuff. She's important to the story as well. So in this area we learn about the Outsiders, who are a group of robots that are looking for a way to the outside. Now there are 4 main Outsiders, but there's only one of them left alive, who's called Momo. He dresses quite fancily, let's say. He's not like the average robot. He wears quite funky clothing and very colourful. And when we meet him as the cat, you notice he's given up on trying to find his friends because his transceiver's broken. So to give him this spark, we go and find all his friends' journals and read them to him, and basically he finds out a way to fix his transceiver and contact his friends. And this begins the spiel of trying to figure out a way to get to the other one of his friends. And these companions are sort of the cornerstones of the story. They're leading you through the story. So there's one situated in each main area. So you have Momo at the start, and then we go into like an overtaken place. So basically the Zergs are like an infection, and they have big areas of the city that they've completely locked off because it's infected so much. And another one of the Outsiders is stuck there because he was trying to test a prototype weapon. He's called Doc. So we basically work with his son Elliot. We try and fix his tracker, and then we go and find him. We get this weapon, and for those 5 minutes you feel powerful. You have this weapon that you can stop the Zergs with. And one of the best choices is they take that away. The game developers take it away after about 10 minutes, which is good, because if you have this weapon, there's going to be a way people exploit it. The game no longer becomes helpless, and that's not what I don't think that's what they were going for. They're going for the cat is an outsider. It's not supposed to be here. It shouldn't be able to fight these things off because it isn't made for it. Its only goal is survive and escape. So the game rids you of that easy choice, and you have to use wits and the robots and everything that's surrounding you to escape on your own. That and B12. And you continue through the city, eventually completing Momo's quest, and you move in and you head off, and eventually you have to abandon Momo as he decides to let you go and asks you to tell his friends that he was brave, as he lets you go off into the sewers, which no one has entered because of just how much the Zerks have infected. And this is a more darker area of the game. You see the full force of the infection, where they've basically turned the sewers into this giant pit of just whatever they are. It's everywhere, it's spread, it's disgusting. There's eyeballs everywhere, there's clusters that if you walk near they pop and Zerks come out. And it's not a nice place. There isn't much to do in here, which is nice. The one objective is just get out. But there are a few, it's just kind of contextual things you can pick up about what the Zerks are, where they come from, how they work. They're obviously sort of a multiplying race, sort of like a single-celled organism that just mutates. It's like it just divides and conquers. So they're kind of like a cell, they split and then they regrow in these little sacs. And it looks really cool, and it's really well done. This area looks very thematically well done. It's very dark. There is still light though. It's not like a shitty dark area that just is dark because it's dark. It still has that almost red glow of a nasty place, which isn't fitting for a ginger cat and a light up robot. Once you do exit the sewers, that area is quite short because of just how little there is to do there. You come out to an area called the Old Tree, basically. I think it's directly translated to the Old Tree. Well, it's called the Ant Village. It's basically like this giant tree that the Outsiders have built a base on. And Zabaltazar, which is another one of the Outsiders, is up there. And he has created a little civilization. And when we walk up to this village, we see a cryopod, which is apparently the robot starts recalling a memory of, this is the last thing that the scientist that he worked with walked into. And he starts recalling his own memories. So he says, the scientist walked into here and everything went black. He then woke up to a cat freeing him. And we get the realization that B12 is in fact the scientist that he's been talking about helping the entire game. And he goes silent for a while because he's trying to overcome the fact that he is the final human left in this dystopia. He is all that remains of that time's culture, that species culture. And his death is the meaning between losing all of human culture or carrying on what he knows and all of his friends and his family and everything he knew. Eventually we do find Zabaltazar. He's at the top of the tree and he tells us basically where Clementine is, who is the next of the Outsiders and the last of the Outsiders, and she has moved her way up to Midtown. And we find out that even in the apocalypse, the humans have decided to split themselves into a class system, really showing just how much human nature pulls through. Is we've literally divided ourselves. Even in a time where people need to come together, it's always split by class and money and power and wealth, because that's all we can think of. We're such a simple race that that we're so barbaric, all we can do is find ways to one-up each other. We can't deal with the fact that everyone is equal. And there has not been many points in time where everyone has been equal. Because we as humans, there's always going to be an outlier. Someone has to be different and people won't accept it. And the thing is, the robots have been copying human culture, so obviously they've never demolished this system because they're just doing what humans did. And they're going along with this. So people that live in the slums and the bottom of the dead city they can't get up to the midtown. It's just hard for them. So as a cat, we start heading up towards there. We get in fairly easily, discovering a subway station on the way that is blocked off. And inside you get this massive cyberpunk environment. It is massive, there are neon everywhere, and you start to notice this is a sort of police state. A group called the Sentinels have taken over all the entrances and all the exits, and you can see their influence around the place. At both exits to the outside, there are gates where the Sentinels are stopping people from leaving. There's different points in the story where they're around, and they're basically just kind of prevalent throughout the rest of the story. But now you and B12 basically have to figure out how the hell you get back up to the surface. So Clementine leaves you Zabaltazar leaves you a little note, and on the back of it are some symbols. So we head off into this sort of apartment complex where Clementine's hiding, and there's symbols for the floor and the door and stuff, and you go and find her. And she's blocked herself away because she's an outsider and the Sentinels are after her. She is a person of interest. And she basically tells us that she knows a way to get to the surface. She knows a way to get to the control room, which opens the surface. And that's by a subway station. But to power the subway station, we need a atomic battery. And she knows where to get an atomic battery. There is one place, the factory, that is now also owned by a corporation called NecoCorp, who is the reigning corporation in this. In a lot of these stories, there is always a corporation that has took over or sided with the police state that produces all their stuff and basically has full reign. So we meet some more colourful characters along this way, and using some of our intuition to sneak our way into this factory as a cat and steal this atomic battery. There are some really, really cool puzzles, there's really cool characters and environments. The whole of Midtown looks amazing, and there's loads to do. There's loads of little contextual things, these memories that you can pick up, these things you can translate to find out what happened to humanity, how the Zurks came to be. And I think it's around here where you find out that the Zurks were made by the humans. Basically, obviously we're still facing the whole pollution thing and waste. So in this underground utopia, the humans wanted to create something that would destroy all of their trash and not leave any residual effects, and they created Zurks, which at first were eating their trash, and then they evolved to start eating everything. So they eat the robots, and they basically became a plague, and you couldn't go near them. They would just eat you because that's what they did to everything. And we sort of get little contextual clues to why you're in this underground place, why the robots have done everything. There's a little snippet in the slums about how you weren't allowed coloured lights for a long time, that the oppressors stopped them from having colour, and one person turned the lights on and he got taken away, but that encouraged all the other robots to turn the lights on, and they couldn't stop them at that point. Which is really nice to see a sort of revolution come through, and something positive has come from that human nature that they've developed as a way to overthrow governments. You continue through and you end up in the factory. You do this little section with a couple cool puzzles, some nice environments of this factory. There's just some weird shit going on. You steal this battery, and the Sentinels come after you, basically. And in a ditch effort, Clementine gives you the battery, gives you the key to the subway, and lets you go off alone, saying that she can't make it, but she can distract the Sentinels, basically giving herself away just to let this little cat escape, saying that not everyone has to reach the surface as long as one person does. And before this happens, you end up in a place. Basically, Clementine leads you to a contact. His name is Blazer. Basically, Clementine wants you to find him. You go to this really cool nightclub which shows you like a future dance and stuff, and you can mess around with everything, and it's really cool and stuff. But basically, you find out that Blazer has been persuaded by the Sentinels, and he basically gives you in, and you're taken to jail, where the cat is to be drowned and Clementine is to be erased. And B12 has been captured as well. Going through this, you get to see the instinctual side of the cat and how much it's grown to love these robots that it has no real connection to, by risking his own life to go and save B12 instead of just escaping straight away. And you get a really nice reunion where B12 thanks him for coming back and being a real friend. And eventually you start to go out, and before you reach the end where you go back into the city, you see this room guarded by a few drones, and it's full of robots. Well, it's not full of robots, but there's a couple of robots in there. And when you go over to scan one, B12 sees that he is completely gone. He has no software, his memories are gone, his personality is gone, he is just there with power. And he seems very solemn, asking, please don't let us get caught because we will end up like that. And you get to see the real tyranny that can come from the human nature. Obviously these robots have adapted this. It's not their programming anymore, it's ours. They've adapted this nature to whatever does what we don't like. We take everything away from it. We take away their personality, we take away their rights. And it's kind of a show for things that have happened in the past, stuff like the Holocaust and slavery. We don't like what these people are doing, we capture them and we remove themselves. We remove everything that makes them them. And it's a real show of what the bad parts of humanity does. But eventually you do escape with B12 and Clem, and then you obviously get to the subway. Once you do get to the subway, you turn it on and you head out, and you come to what I would consider the creepiest part of the game, which is called the control room. Now this is the final part of the game, and when you get to the train platform, you realize on the train platform the floor is still quite wet because it's being mopped, but nothing is here again, and everything is very eerily clean. Everything's well maintained. And then you go and speak to a robot, and there's no personality. He's simply programmed to be a cleaner. And you start heading through this control room, and you realize no one is here. There's a big gate that says City Sealed, which is basically like the entrance. It's this massive like bulkhead with hydraulic hinges and everything. But all the robots around here are completely devoid of personality. And because they haven't lived alongside humans, they have not picked up those traits or that programming from us. Now here we have a fun few puzzles, and we make it into the control room, where there is a final puzzle where we have to activate these computers and unlock the city. In this process, B12 will uncover his last major memory, and he remembers what happened to humanity, and there was a plague that spread. Whatever it was that killed the humans, it spread quickly, and he saw his entire family die, and his last ditch effort to save what was left of humanity was to put himself inside the computer system. And it really fully comes to him that he is the final human. He is the last thing standing between them and complete absolution. He is the only thing left of real human culture. But I think there's also a revelation in him as he hooks himself up to the unlock system. And every unlock we do, we notice it damages his body more. But he keeps telling us he'll be fine. And we get to the final one, and just before he locks himself into the software, he tells us about how he knew from the start that this would be the way he would die. He knew that it was going to destroy his body, and if he locks himself in, it quite possibly will destroy him. So you have to pick him up and put him on this panel, and this cutscene plays out where he tells you that he tells you that you are the best friend you could have asked for, and he realizes now that the robots are humanity, but they can be better. They haven't been tainted by the issues of our past. They don't have that incessant human nature. They have ways to be better without us. And he doesn't need to carry on that human tradition because they've carried it on for so long without him. And he gives his life to open up the doors and free all of the robots. And because it's mentioned earlier in the game that the weapon that was used to kill the Zurks is UV radiation, obviously they're abolished with the sunlight. And we get a nice scene of seeing all the characters you've met throughout the game seeing sunlight for the first time and reacting to it. And you have a lovely little scene where B12 finishes and he's knocked to the floor, and the cat walks up to next to him and headbutts him and wonders where he's gone, and then falls asleep next to him while you watch the massive door open in the background. And it's a very impactful scene of how many connections you've made on this very short journey. It is a small game. It's maybe 4 hours for a first playthrough. and you realize how many things you've met, how many things you've seen, how many people you've met, and you can fully see the beauty of the game, and you can see the tears of the city. You can see the slums in Midtown, and you can realize and recognize all the places you've been to just by pointing them out. And you can see just how cool the city looks, how cool the environments are, how environmentally sound everything is. And there's real pillars of class separated with giant walls. But as it opens, the sunlight spreads, and everyone is one and the same. Eventually, the cat does leave the control room, and he opens up the big double doors, and he walks out. And we get a nice cutscene of him smelling the air again, looking at the sunlight, and in the end, he is just a cat. No matter how much connection he's made, it's a cat. Their one nature is just themselves. And without a second thought, he just runs off into the distance. Now, we do get a little flicker in a control panel hinting that maybe B12 is still alive in the system, which basically leaves it open-ended for the developers in case they do choose to continue. But the game is wrapped up perfectly. All of the sections of this game are so well done. They're so well packaged together. Everything is properly closed. There's no big plot holes. You just need to follow the context to find out what happened to everything, and it's just a really nice ending. And you can tell that the developers don't have much of an intention to carry this on for 6 or 7 games or bring out 4 paid DLCs. They just wanted to make a good experience, and it was that. It's a very visually pleasing game. It has great mechanics, an amazing story, and it leaves you wanting more, which you don't get much. You haven't had that from many games in the past few years. So many live service multiplayer games that are simply there for money's sake. You haven't had a proper good story game apart from maybe like Elden Ring in the past while, and maybe like some other single player games that have come out. But the whole game is so well done, from the graphics to the sound design to the story itself, all the memories and stuff that you can do, all the things you can figure out. And overall, I recommend this game to anyone. If you own a PlayStation, you can buy the PS Plus Essential or Plus, whatever one that gives you access to the game library. And Stray is included in that. It's a fairly short game, 4 or 5 hours, but it's 100% worth the play. It's such a good story. It's such a pleasure to play. And I do hope that these developers continue to make games like this they're not particularly long, but they're not money grabs. They're just good games, because it feels like we are running out of them. And there is a good commentary in here for you don't need to live on to live on. Basically, he was the final human. B12 was the final human, but he could see just how much culture and history that the robots would create, and how much they've learned from the humans, that he doesn't need to be there to support them through their whatever else they decide to do with the Earth. And eventually also showing that nature always wins. The cat never fully formed an attachment to this robot. He was never gonna try and save him, because at the end of the day, it's just a cat. It's just gonna go off and be silly and do what a cat does. It is a very bittersweet ending, and it's such a well done game. And just applaud to the developers for making such a good but short game with such interesting characters, such a good premise, and starting off as something that could just be a gimmick and you could base the whole game around that, but bringing it into something bigger. Just well done. Hopefully they keep developing games like this, and hopefully we'll get some more games that are similar to this. But I just think Stray is an absolute masterpiece of a game, especially for this year, and everyone should play it. There's not much else I have to say. Thank you for listening to this review. I'm hoping to do more game reviews in the future. Any other games that you want me specifically to review, any TV shows or movies, I'm going to start doing more of this stuff, learning how to use Premiere Pro and things, and trying to make the commentary of the videos just a bit better. Any links for music or gameplay are linked down below. And yeah, goodbye.